Hello from 50 plus job seekers in Massachusetts networking groups, and welcome to our conversation with the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, Michael Memmolo. This conversation was recorded January 23rd, 2025. I would like to introduce Mr. Memmolo. He has served in the roles like CFO and Chief Operating Officer to the Massachusetts State Senate, the Department of Public Safety, and the Division of Professional Licensure. He was the CFO, COO, and Director of Human Resources to the Massachusetts State Ethics Commission, and he has a long work history with the MCAD. So welcome, Mr. Memmolo.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate this. I really appreciate everybody attending. Hopefully I can impart some facts about the MCAD, how we can be helpful, particularly as it pertains to age as a protected class under Massachusetts anti-discrimination law.
Great. Well, can you tell me what the mission is really of the MCAD? Because I don't think that, I'm guessing that some of our people that are listening in are not familiar with what you folks do.
Yeah, so the MCAD is the state level anti-discrimination agency, and our mission is a lofty one. The agency was created in 1946, and for the better part of 80 years, it has been to eradicate discrimination in the Commonwealth, and we do that by the investigation and adjudication of complaints of discrimination, as well as through our extensive outreach and training units and offerings that we have to sort of be able to educate the public of what their rights actually are relative to anti-discrimination, particularly in the areas of employment, housing, public accommodations, and credit and lending, and education to a very small point just around admissions to higher education institutions.
Okay. So what types of discrimination does the commission typically address?
Yeah, so our major areas are, employment based discrimination and in housing. The great the great percentage of complaints that are filed here are filed, based on discrimination in the workplace or discrimination around housing. Last year, we just released our annual report about a week or two ago, and we had about 3,500 complaints, which is almost a 2 decades high for us. And approximately 80% of those were workplace-based discrimination. We see, relative to really where we're seeing a lot of the discrimination happen, like retaliation. Is a big area where folks are seeing a lot of discrimination. And then, we're looking at sort of disability, discrimination based on disability. And a great number of those complaints are failure to accommodate. And that's across housing and employment-based discrimination claims. And then, to round out sort of our top protected classes, then sex-based discrimination, and discrimination based on race or color.
Yeah. Okay. So what about your role there at the commission? What are your key responsibilities?
Yeah, so this is a new role for the commission. We went the better half of, like I said, close to 80 years, where sort of the commissioners, and we have a board of 3 commissioners, amazing commissioners that are appointed by the governor, that were sort of running the day-to-day, but also doing a lot of substantive work. So being investigating commissioners, holding public hearings, writing decisions, things of that nature. And, it became sort of apparent in these times, and to be able to work under the Massachusetts open meeting law, that the agency needed sort of an administrative head. And typically in boards of commissions, that is an executive director role. So it was sort of easy for me to help the commission, transition to that change. I was the director of operations as well as the chief financial officer. And a lot of my day-to-day job duties in those roles were overseeing the day-to-day operations of the agency, overseeing human resources, overseeing the operational pieces of the offices. So a lot of it really overlapped with what an executive director would do anyway. So that's really where I am now. I'm sort of the the administrative head of the agency. I tend to be the face of the agency, if that makes any sense. But I'm responsible for the agency meeting its statutory and regulatory requirements at the end of the day. So I oversee staff of approximately 85 employees across offices in Boston, Worcester, Springfield. We have an amazing, like I said, amazing commissioners, tremendous managers here that oversee our investigations division, our Office of General Counsel, our legal unit, as well as our training and alternative dispute resolution units. So day to day, it's how can I best position this agency to be able to carry out its statutory mandates in fighting discrimination.
So, can you talk a little bit about the key laws, the key statutes that, and I guess that the word would maybe be enforced that you folks do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the major laws that we enforce are Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 151B and 151C. Those are the state's anti-discrimination laws. They have been around longer, and as the commission, longer than our federal counterparts. So our laws tend to be more broad, more inclusive than federal anti-discrimination laws. And it really those chapters of the Mass General laws really spell out, who are the protected classes and relative to race, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, and really sort of spell out, who is protected under Massachusetts anti-discrimination law and the things that, employers cannot do. Things that housing providers cannot do, things people that in public accommodations, gaining entrance to anything that's publicly available, things that that people cannot do and cannot discriminate against individuals based on their membership in a protected class.
Well, our group is most curious about ageism and age discrimination. What are some of the biggest challenges that the commission faces in terms of ageism and age discrimination?
Yeah, I'll be quite honest, is just people knowing their rights, right? Across, 151B and 151C, age, is a protected class and it has different meanings depending on, the piece of the law. So most prevalently, and I think most germane to this discussion is, under the employment piece, where age is, sort of defined as anybody that is older than the age of 40. So, that is the protected class for employment discrimination in Massachusetts. And, I think this is sort of across the board, not just for individuals that, are older than 40, but knowing what their rights are, knowing who we are, where to find us, how to identify if they're being discriminated against, and then, knowing that they have been and coming to us and how to file a complaint of discrimination, based on their protected class.
So is there any collaboration between your agency and other state agencies like the Department of Public Health or maybe the Department of Developmental Services or that type of thing?
So we do try to partner with a lot of our what we call sister agencies in Massachusetts. We really do try to look to see where there's overlap in constituency, where it just makes sense that another agency would serve a constituency that the MCAD would be serving. But we really have a very strong partnership with our federal counterparts. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, again, where folks would go to, file their federal complaints of discrimination, as well as the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, so HUD. Those are two agencies at the federal level that this agency has for decades had partnership agreements and contracts with. We do a lot of the work for those agencies relative to, intaking complaints of discrimination, and investigating those complaints of discrimination. So, we're really and try to have as much overlap with state and federal and even municipal cities and towns. We do have quite a good relationship with human rights commissions throughout the Commonwealth, particularly in Worcester, where where one of our offices is located. So we're always consistently looking to be everywhere we possibly can be, and getting our message out there.
Are you seeing any trends in, like, is there an increase, do you feel, that in certain types of discrimination that are occurring throughout the state?
So relative to trends, we're just at a very minimum level, we're seeing more and more cases being filed here. We've seen a growth since we've come out of COVID. And like I said, last year was a record high for us in almost 20 years. We actually needed to, and this is sort of in our annual report, we were actually at a capacity of taking in so many complaints. We didn't have enough investigators to be able to assign it to them. So there was no realistic way that we could actually continue to take in complaints at the rate we were without contributing to a massive backlog. So we had to sort of ramp down our availability based on our capacity. But we are seeing, quite a bit of, like I said, the forms of retaliation that we're seeing an increase of is, retaliation, disparate treatment, disparate impact, harassment, failure to accommodate, is always up there. And we've also seen a number of housing cases come our way that we've seen an increase this past fiscal year, and it is still continuing into the current fiscal year. So housing is definitely an area where we're seeing a significant amount of growth. I was just on a panel yesterday with similar agencies that do similar work throughout the Northeast. So, the state of Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and I'm forgetting at least one. But we were all sort of saying the same thing. We're seeing more and more complaints being filed. We're seeing more and more housing complaints being filed, and we're seeing the same types of basis of discrimination. So retaliation, disability, race, sex, as the areas that we're seeing the most increases in. And that's across, the Northeast.
Could I ask you about failure to accommodate? What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if there is an individual that has a disability, whether seen or unseen, and requires an accommodation or something to be able to perform when we'll keep it to the employment realm, to perform the essential functions of their job. So, typically these are, screen readers or speak to speech computer software, or a different type of chair, or an up-down, I'm literally on one, an up-down desk. Those are all reasonable accommodations. And, under the law, the employer is supposed to engage the employee in the interactive dialogue to find out what do you need and what is possible, right? Like, it's very different if somebody's asking, you need to build out a brand new office, as opposed to, we can give you another office over here. So having that interactive dialogue, and what we find is a lot of the failure to accommodate is employers aren't even having that conversation with their employees, or they're ignoring their requests, from the get-go, or just denying them outright before even engaging them in any type of meaningful conversation. So that's where we generally see failure to accommodate, and that's very similar on the housing side. I know it doesn't have a lot of applicability here, but I need a disability accommodation, like a shower, walk-in shower, right? Something like that. And again, housing providers not engaging in the conversation and interactive dialogue and not accommodating, failure to accommodate.
So, yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, that definitely clears it up for me. And what about uh, retaliation? Could you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that that's an area that people they feel that they might have lost control in a situation because of retaliation. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so again, one of our highest incidents of filing here. So when you file a complaint of discrimination, that is protective activity. So typically what will happen is, you'll file a complaint, or somebody will file a complaint, and then, that complaint is served right on the party that you said aggrieved you in the case of employment, and an employer or a manager or something of that nature. So they're then made aware, right? And then, or made known that this discrimination was filed, this complaint of discrimination was filed, and then they do some sort of adverse action, right? Okay, you filed a complaint of discrimination, rescind that or we'll fire you, or they just fire you, right? And it's all based on timing as well. There are instances where an employee may have already been in a discipline situation before they filed a complaint of discrimination, or had not a great track record relative to their employment. So there's different scenarios, but typically speaking, the incident of discrimination or perceived discrimination occurred, and then the employer does something, an additional adverse action that is retaliatory against the employee for bringing that issue either to their process at the place of business themselves, or here at the MCAD.
Okay, I see. Yeah. And somebody put a question in the chat, and thank you so much for the question, Haley, which is about protection for, I mean, most of the people that are part of our networking group they're job seekers, they're applicants. So what if you apply for a job and you believe that you've been discriminated against? Are those individuals protected by the law as well?
Yes, so seeking or actively being a candidate is protected as part of employment, like you're seeking employment. And I just saw something come up in the chat, and yes, let's be frank, discrimination in 2025 is not as overt as it was in the past. It's taking on different different types of things, right? To be discrimination now. Part of discussion is, also the use of artificial intelligence, right? We know that some of those programs, algorithms are themselves, because of the way they've been programmed, the information that they've been fed, have proven to be discriminatory. And these are applications that are making decisions on people applying for jobs, people applying for promotions within the companies that they're at. We're sort of seeing, the information that's out there that, these things are, programmed a certain way. They take in as much information as they do. And if they're not seeing something that they were programmed to do, like say they were programmed by, an all male team, and have only seen certain types of colleges, and then it all of a sudden encounters, say, a college that is exclusively for females, right? we know that they were kicking those applications out. So it really is a whole totality of the situation in trying to assess, what discrimination looks like. I think Eric, you and I, we've been in human resources. There's just things you're not supposed to do, but people still do them now, like just asking straight out, how old are you? When did you graduate from high school? These things do happen, and those are, red flags and causes for, at least the inquiry to be made, an investigation as to, whether that company is discriminating against people based on their age or protected class.
Yeah, and I don't want to put you too much on the spot here, but a person in the chat did ask, is there for people who make an applicant who makes a complaint, I would imagine that that's a little more difficult to, to prove, isn't it? I mean, is there a higher or lower success rate or with trying to prove those circumstances of ageism or?
Yeah, I mean, I could see how that would be perceived. I don't have actual data on that, but I would tell you that in practice, we would investigate it any other way, right? You would the things that I think would be requested were, what is the applicant pool? What was the makeup of the applicant pool? What was the makeup of the age of the applicant pool, right? The race, how many were moved into, the semifinals and things like that. What sort of decision points were made and what was, and was there any actual discussion, and this has been seen in some cases where there are emails saying, hire the young person, hire, this type of person. That those things tend to show themselves when, an investigation unfolds. So, I would say to anybody that has even thought in the process of applying for employment that they have been discriminated against, that they should come talk to us.
All right. Well, that's great. Can you could you share? And I know that obviously you can't talk about specific cases or anything like that. Would never ask about that. But have there been? Could you talk about one or two cases maybe where you feel that the outcome really made a significant difference for the employee or the job seeker or whatever?
Yeah, we really sort of, we've had a whole line of decisions, like, right, all of our MCAD, hearing decisions, full commission decisions. When I first sort of thought about this question, I was, how could I relate it back to employment? We don't really have many, relative to the application process, but we did have a case last year, Stash Pizza, where we really established employers being liable for the actions of their employees. This was someone, it was a pizza shop, and individual went in and was discriminated against by one of the employees, and the employer made the case that it wasn't an employee. The employee was doing things off hours that weren't under employment, but they were still, it was because of the interaction of them as an employee. And we found for the complainant, and that was $105,000 award to that individual for very egregious race-based discrimination. So we do have a lot of them. I was really trying to find ones that would fit sort of this
Yeah.
group, and I just I was a little remiss in getting real heavy hitting ones.
No,
But
I understand, but that's important to know. I think that for people where there's any kind of discrimination that occurs, that there's some hope, and that the commission takes all of these complaints seriously. So that's great to know. There's another thing in the chat here, if I may. So I'm going to go off on a little bit of tangent here, but I think it's kind of an interesting question. It says, in settlements, Do you think it should be legal for companies to stipulate that the MCAD or related groups cannot be contacted? In other words, the complaint cannot be reported. So I'm assuming that the employer, they've made a settlement with the employee and that this is part of the settlement. And is that legal, first of all, to start off with?
So that would be one that I would definitely want to consult our general counsel on, because I know that has
Yeah.
been an issue, and I don't want to say anything that is in opposition to what our
Yeah, I
legal
gotcha.
posture has been on this. But I get it. Yeah, you signed a settlement agreement, and it says you're not going to file this with EEOC, the MCAD. How legal is that? To anyone that's encountered that situation, I would say to call us. For sure, and have our investigators work with our attorneys to sort of because it really is a lot of individual based types of facts that sort of go into some of these things too. So,
Right,
yep.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to sort
Okay.
of skirt the question on
No, no,
that.
but I understand. Yeah, yeah. No, I know. It is one of those situations where it's a little bit touchy there. So, I kind of get the feeling that you're very dedicated to this type of work. And what originally drew you to doing this type of work?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked for the legislature. I've worked in the administration or for the executive branch, and I've worked for these independent agencies, and I've really been drawn to those good government agencies. And when this position, well, I should say my old position came available, and I started talking to some folks that worked here. And, at the end of the day, right, you always want to feel good about the work you're doing or contributing to. And when I was sort of seeking employment here, I did, I knew some people. I literally, state ethics, where I was the former CFO, right around the corner from our office here in Boston. So I knew folks here, and I was, intrigued by what they were doing and how much of an impact they were making in people's lives. I mean, this is what we deal with, people's, the most basic things to live, right? Your employment and your housing. And those are, I don't know, two more important things in people's day to day, where you can wake up and actually say you're having a substantive impact. How much more fulfilling that could be. And now that I've lived it, I know it to be true. And I get worried about what my next act is going to be, because it's going to be very hard to follow, waking up in every day and contributing to people's basic civil rights. And that to me is the gold standard of, being able to say, I make a difference in that. And it's not me. Like I just need to make sure the train's running the right way. It's the staff here, it's our investigators, it's our attorneys, it's our mediators who are the boots on the ground and fighting the fight every day. And this place and the MCAD would be nothing without them. And I'm just here to make sure the train stays on the tracks.
Got it. Got it. Well, it sounds like you have a group of really dedicated employees there. So that can't hurt for sure. There was another question in here, and it has to do with housing, actually.
Can I just
Let's
interrupt
see.
for a second, ask that
Sure.
you invite Siobhan to verbalize her question up this in the chat. She just said it's a
Yeah.
little bit complex for typing out.
Haley, thank you so very, very much. Eric, is that all right with you?
Sure. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. All right. This is so bizarre. I have to see if I can articulate it in a way that you don't just say this is ludicrous. And first off, thank you for being here. I so appreciate your time. I love that you're here. So I've done a lot of analysis on senior property tax relief.
Okay.
and have found a couple of shocking things to me. Number one, Massachusetts is particularly unfriendly to seniors when compared to most other states. Number two, the very insubstantial property tax relief options that are available for seniors, as far as I can tell, the income and asset requirements, aside from the circuit breaker one, which is so convoluted, it's ludicrous. The minuscule ones that exist for people who are really truly on the edge of poverty that you don't know how they're functioning. Those income and asset levels don't seem to have kept up with inflation at all.
Hmm.
In addition, so there's a state on state thing here. So I'm not gentle stuff, but really I do actually think that the state is discriminating against seniors in terms of property tax relief by not providing, at least keeping up with inflation, and in many other ways, but I realize you can't tackle the world, but I'm just throwing this out there because I know it's weird. The second half of this is town on state. So when I started looking at what towns were doing with the councils on aging, and I understand EOEA and the new name, not the best funded group in the world. I'm not knocking them. But number one, the state doesn't collect enough data to have any analysis about what towns and cities are providing to their senior citizens for property tax relief. The data that is there is often out of date or inaccurate. So it's not actually collected consistently or well. There doesn't seem to be a requirement. Two, I suspect, having done this for a couple of communities, that when you look at what towns have provided for seniors over a time period, for example, in one town, I found that what the town had provided to seniors to the Council on Aging had decreased by 27% when taking into account inflation over a 10-year period. Whereas the school budget, and you cannot, this is not influenced, you can't, it holds whether or not you take number of students or number of seniors into account. The school budget increased by, let's say, 15%. That was to the tune of $10 million, whereas the decrease in the Council on Aging budget was less than $100,000. So a decrease of 27%, peanuts. So I think that Massachusetts has gotten a little out of whack here. Just throwing this all out there, seeing what you say. Thank you for letting me plop it out there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So I'm going to say, those, unfortunately, those are areas where the MCAD doesn't have a jurisdiction, but you're catching me in what should we put it? A purgatory between two pieces of my life. So I am a former city councilor, and currently I am chair of my town's finance and advisory board. So I am acutely aware of what you are speaking of, particularly as my town considers a tax override, and the types of abatements and circuit breaker options available to people on fixed incomes. So I do sympathize, and I will tell you, not in this role as executive director at the MCAD, but those are issues I am very much involved with relative to, like I say, my outside work and being my town's finance advisory board chair. But I think maybe I will be reaching out to you because I might need some of that information to talk to some of our folks in the legislature in that capacity. But I would say, as a practical matter, though, relative to the Commission Against Discrimination, and this is part of some of the barriers that we run up against, right? It's our law is very specific and very nuanced and very geared towards different areas. Like, for all it's worth, everybody thinks, hate crimes. All right, got to come right to, thank you. Got to come right to the MCAD. The MCAD does not handle hate crimes. That's the Office of the Attorney General. So, it does get sort of cloudy what and where and when and how you can come to the MCAD sometimes. But I thank you for sharing and I saw your information pop up. So thank you very much.
Yeah, so we can take a look at that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's another question, and it's a little it might be a little off the beaten path here, but let's see. The local housing authorities have the legal responsibility to, I think I already know the answer to this. Do local housing authorities have the legal responsibility to install walk-in showers for people with documented mobility disabilities who can prove that they need them?
So they do have the requirement to enter into they must, assess the reasonable accommodation, enter into the interactive dialogue, and try to assess the best possible accommodation, as long as it's, there's language around, basically financial burden in the law as well. So, again, it's the totality of the actually engaging the individual that's asking for the reasonable accommodation and finding the best path forward and just having that interactive dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's what makes sense. Yeah. And federal regulation, are they the same regarding age discrimination complaints for both current employees and job candidates?
Yeah, so our laws very much overlap with the EEOC. Again, we have a few more protected classes, but age is in both the federal statute and in Massachusetts anti-discrimination law.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. So how do you see the landscape of anti-discrimination efforts evolving over, well, maybe over the next 4 years, but maybe over the next 10 years? How do you care to predict the future a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think we're going to be, as I said before, discrimination's not, as overt as it used to be, and really, educating our staff about the different ways that discrimination manifests itself, how it's evolving, how it continues to evolve, and so we can be best prepared to be able to understand the things that are happening and investigate it in a real meaningful way. I think, the MCAD, like I said, predates our federal partners. We've been around for a very long time. This agency is going to continue to enforce Massachusetts anti-discrimination law, to everyone that seeks it here in the Commonwealth. And we do our mission is very much predicated on anyone who lives in, works in, or visits Massachusetts. So we truly will accept complaints from anyone, and we'll give them their due process here. So I think, yeah, as we move forward, it's just trying to be as educated as we can. As I said, a little earlier, very much concerned about artificial intelligence and what that is going to mean for discrimination moving forward, and how we investigate it and how we even know it's happening. Like that's part of my huge concern right now. There's no overlaying law that says, you've got to tell someone when they're interacting with an AI. I mean, it's not that, that old, welcome to movie phone that some of us can remember from back in the day. These voices are very, very much sounding like real people. There are algorithms out there and programs out there that you can even have an interaction like this through Zoom, that you're very much looking at somebody that looks like they're a real person, but they might not be. And that is frightening to me, because it's just, you don't know when it's being used or how it's being used. And then at the end of the day, who's going to be responsible for the discriminatory conduct of the application? Is it the designers? Is it the employers or the housing authorities that are implementing it? Is it all of them? So it is a big concern, and I think that is the frontier of discrimination.
Yeah, yeah, that absolutely, absolutely makes sense. So this is, I kind of see you coming on with us today and talking as an educational effort. What other educational efforts does the MCAD engage in to let people know about the
Yeah,
services that you
so,
offer?
we have a whole training unit that provides free and paid trainings. We do these for employers, housing providers, people that are seeking housing, people that are seeking employment, people that are employed. We really do an exemplary training and offer quite a bit of it. We last year was a historical high. Our trainings were almost 300 and we, touched almost 7,000 people through our
Wow.
trainings. Which is, just a true credit to our training unit. And mind you, there's only three of them. And they are out
Wow.
there doing an incredible amount of work and outreach. And we've gotten, a little, I would say, hip to the times, right? We do our public service announcements every year statewide. And we've joined social media. We have a tremendous press secretary here who has, leveraged social media to be able to promote the agency, where we are and what we're doing, and to educate the public. We do Fact Fridays, that sort of give these little facts about, knowing your rights and what, what's against the law in Massachusetts. So, all those things together, I think, have really sort of been able to promote the agency and educate the public at large about, what we do.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah. Well, let's see, I did see something fly across again in the chat here. It was about DEI, which is, of course, a newly controversial subject, but does the state invest in promoting DEI to employers? Is that part of what you do?
So not at the agency level. Our commissioners have looked at this issue as it pertains to employment, particularly after the rulings in Harvard and North Carolina relative to DEI on campuses. And it's our commissioner statement is up on our website. And it just basically says, DEI can be a powerful tool as long as itself is not discriminatory in its implementation. So that was a piece that our commissioners thought was very important to address, particularly to the employment community. We did get a lot of calls after those Supreme Court rulings came down, relative to what does this mean. So our position is again, in that document relative to our commissioners. And, again, Massachusetts anti-discrimination law is what it is, and we will continue to enforce that.
Yeah,
Yes,
very
I
good.
saw somebody with the EOC and AI. Yeah, that's the EOC is extraordinarily involved and concerned about AI in the hiring process. We typically have our yearly meetings with them, and they do and have provided some training with tremendous individuals that are leaders in the technology field, about AI, the way it's being used, how it's being created. But it is it has been very high on the EEOC's radar. How that changes, that will remain to be seen.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I just have one more question for you, actually. So how does one file a concern about discrimination with the MCAD?
Yep. So like I said before, we do have 3 offices right now: Boston, Worcester, Springfield. On any given day, anyone can walk into one of those offices to file a complaint of discrimination. We also do online intakes of discrimination. That we have if some of you have seen some of the news about the MCD, we have a terrible way to make an online appointment to actually have an online intake. It is one that we are addressing, very, very important to us, but that is an option, as well as we still have in our regulations the ability to actually just mail in a complaint of discrimination, and the agency does, follow up on that. Well, you said what does the future bring, and that's a good way to tie it in. So we have known that things have been done antiquated, and we have some pretty not great technology that we're using now. So we are actively engaged in a project to revamp our technology here, and for the first time ever, move the Commonwealth and the MCAD into online filing of complaints of discrimination. So you won't even need to make appointments or come in. You'll be able to do it at home, or from wherever you have an internet connection. With really looking at how do we walk. A lot of individuals that file here do not have, and you don't need, legal representation. And how do we best capture and help those individuals that don't have sort of a legal background or don't even know who we are, but just know, well, I've been discriminated against and this is where I have to file, to make that process as easy as possible for them. Again, we would be joining our federal partner and a lot of other similarly situated civil rights or anti-discrimination agencies across the United States that do have online filing. So we're very, very, very excited about this. And the back end for our staff to actually have an application to do their work that is less than 25 years old and leverages technology and data and analytics is just going to really be a game changer for our agency.
Well, and it can start with a phone call. I mean, can it not? If
Oh yes,
there's
yep,
a person
and we're
in
still
Berkshire County or something like that who.
Yep, and we'll still, we're very mindful that not everybody's going to be able to use the technology. Not everybody has access to technology, right? And sort of the way we do things today, we're still going to have to keep those options available to people. But my and the agency has really wanted to ensure that we're meeting people where they are and making access to the MCAD and its services and the ability to file your complaint as easy as possible.
All right. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Memmolo, for taking some time. I'm sure that you have rather crowded days, and so I'm really appreciative that you were able to take the time to join us today. And I know that the group of people that are watching live and people that'll be watching the recording will be thankful for your time. So thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you. And I thank everyone for attending. Great questions. We want to try to get as much information about the MCAD out as possible and take any question that we can. And, sometimes I have the answer, sometimes I don't, as you saw today. So, but I really appreciate it. And yes, I will be following up with at least some folks on this call. That's for sure.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you so much for being here, Michael, and thank you to everyone who participated and joined us today. And we hope to see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.